Chapter 10, confidence intervals. I did a previous video on a confidence interval for the mean, and now we're going to do the second half of the chapter, a confidence interval for a proportion. So, here's the problem. A nationwide random survey of 1,500 adults asked about attitude toward alternative medicine such as acupuncture, massage therapy, and herbal therapy. Among the respondents, 666 said they would use alternative medicine if traditional medicine was not producing the results they wanted. And then the key sentence: construct a 90% confidence interval for the proportion of Americans who would use alternative medicine. As I said in the other video, this right here will help you, especially on your conclusion. Step 1 is to name the confidence interval. Is it a mean or a proportion? Well, in this case, they're asking a yes or no question, so that's going to tell you whether or not it's a proportion. They're asking you a question, yes or no, that's going to be a proportion, and also here in this sentence it says, for the proportion. So step 1, this is a one sample proportion problem, and sometimes they throw the letter Z in there. One sample Z proportion. It doesn't matter too much. We use Z because it is approximately normal when the right conditions work, which we'll check in a second. But this is a one sample. This chapter is all about one sample. We're not comparing two different groups. We're just looking at one group. So that's step 1, one sample proportion. Step 2 are the conditions. We always want to check, where did we get the data? In this case, who did we ask this question of? It says a random survey. So we can just state it. Hey, it was a simple random sample and it was stated in the problem. The next part is the normal check. We cannot use the central limit theorem. That's for the mean confidence intervals. I cannot graph it. That's for the mean. There's only one thing I do. I check to see if the sample size is big enough by taking n times p and seeing if that's greater or equal to 10. And I also take n times 1 minus p and see if it's greater than or equal to 10. 10, not 100. 10. N is 1,500. We do have to plug in these numbers. AP wants us to do that. P, they do not tell us P. P is the proportion that said yes to alternative medicine. Technically, these are P hats. I don't think it'll be a problem for you, but technically those are P hats. So I'm going to take, to find my P hat, I'm going to take 660 divided by 1,500 to figure out P hat. And it is 0.44. Greater than or equal to 10. And that's going to turn out to be 660. This is 1,500 times 0.56. And that should be like 840, I believe. And as you can clearly see, these are well above 10. I definitely have a big enough sample size. That is the required conditions. AP very rarely checks the, do we have too big of a sample? So I'm going to give you extra credit on the test. It's nice to know. Is what you do is you take 10 times n. 10 times the sample size. So I would say 10 times 1,500 is 15,000. Are there at least 15,000 adults in America? Well, of course there are more than 1,500 or 15,000 U.S. adults. So therefore, we don't have too big of a sample. This is the required one. 10 times by sample not required. Step 3 is the math part. The mechanics, I think, is what they say. So step 3 is my best guess at P, my best guess at the population percentage is the the sample proportion. So it's going to be P hat plus or minus Z star. It is mean T, proportion Z. And then standard deviation, P hat times 1 minus P hat all over N. So let's see, we already figured out that P hat was 0.44 plus or minus 90%. You can do what we did in the previous chapter or the previous section and use inverse norm function to solve this, or you can use your t-table. Down at the bottom, 90% z star is 1.645. So this comes from the table. You can use your calculator, inverse norm it, and there you go. The numbers, 0.44 times 0.56 divided by 1,500. And now we have some button pushing. 0.44 times 0.56. Divide that by 1,500. Then I got to take the square root of that thing. Times that by 1.645. And I get about 2%. I'm gonna round it to 2% because that makes my life easier. So plus or minus 2%. So my interval is going to be between 0.42 and 0.46. Not quite half of Americans would use alternative measurement, but a good chunk, over 40%. So that is step 3. The last step, I always look to the last sentence. Construct a 90% confidence interval for the proportion of Americans who use alternative medicine. So, step 4, we are 90% confident that the true proportion of Americans that would use alternative medicine is between 0.42 and 0.46. Nice thing for a proportion, there is no units. It's 42% to 46% or 0.42 to 0.46. That, you all have on your test a mean confidence interval and a proportion confidence interval. I think I'll do one more video that talks a couple of other things, but this is a big chunk of your test.